10 people were shot dead in the Cape Flats this past weekend. According to the police, several other people were also injured. The violence took place in various areas, including Lavender Hill, Nyanga, Manenberg and Hanover Park. We're now joined by J.P. Smith, the City of Cape Town's Mayoral Committee member for Safety and Security. Thank you very much, sir, for your time and your patience with us this afternoon. To your understanding, what happened this time around?
We have a fairly consistent crisis with gang violence. We have gang shootings that flare up from time to time. That was in addition to a few weeks ago when we had a mass shooting in Guguletu, and also an assassination of a person involved allegedly in the construction mafia. But the pervasive violence that is driving this body count is the conflict between gangs in parts of the Cape Flats, and we are constantly now, our Metro Police and our LEAP project are in these areas working daily with significant overtime hours, and we're taking firearms off the street every day. In a period of 7 days, we took 9 firearms. And so it is deeply distressing, the constant presence of more illegal firearms, no matter how many we take on the street, keeping in mind that in the last 22 months, we've done something like 674 firearm arrests just between our enforcement services, notwithstanding what SAPS is doing.
Mm-hmm. You speak of a crisis with gang violence. You mentioned the construction mafia just a few weeks ago. One Shafiq Nasser was killed in broad daylight in the city of Cape Town. It would appear that this crisis goes much deeper, more so when you speak of the proliferation of guns in the Western Cape. What interventions have been in place to sort of track where these guns are coming from and perhaps try and stave that off?
So the challenge there is, of course, that you're now speaking of space that national government very much reserves for itself. Those kind of crime intelligence operations and investigative operations are precisely what national government continuously claims and affirms is not the domain of local government or even provincial government. So you know that the provincial minister in this case in the Western Cape has repeatedly attempted to initiate processes to create a provincial armory so that the weapons that are confiscated by our policing services in Cape Town can be destroyed here, and that effective supervision can be put in place so that we do not have a repeat of the situation with a national firearms armory where a single corrupt officer, and I doubt very much he was working alone, but he alone was prosecuted and convicted, according to the research by the ISS, disposed around 9,000 firearms, of which he was convicted for over 3,000. So this is a real crisis, that this is possible because it continuously adds the ability of gang members to drive chaos and violence and the upheaval and death in those communities. Even if predominantly amongst other gangsters, it has a debilitating and an horrific impact on the community, and injures or kills innocent bystanders who have nothing to do with the conflicts at hand. So from an investigative point of view, we've hired more and more investigative resources and information management resources, and we're constantly putting pressure on SAPS to work in specific pressure areas. The kidnapping task teams that we formed jointly with them has had positive impact. These last few days, SAPS has again released a press statement giving recognition to the city's role there. We've now put increasing pressure on them to work with them on the extortion side. And the source of firearms is something that if you look at our press statements over the last year, you'll see we are constantly touching on and constantly reminding national government that they need to do something better around the crime intelligence and the investigation of the sources of these firearms. Because as we can see from confiscating them on the street, many of them are firearms that were previously meant to have been destroyed, that were either handed into the police or confiscated in a policing operation or an arrest.
Mr. Smith, you mentioned that the gang members that operate in this specific space need to be handled, and rightfully so. But there are gang members who have also managed to integrate with the high brows of society in the city of Cape Town. Just last week, we were speaking to Aaron Heyman. He's an investigative journalist with Times Live, and he takes a look at the so-called underworld in the city of Cape Town. He mentioned that the situation is quite desperate also in the city of Cape Town, where brazenly people are consuming drugs, or either people are also selling drugs, if you will. And so when we speak of national government playing its part, what role can provincial government play as well? Because we managed to see how you are able to exert force when it comes to a situation you want to get a handle on. We can only speak about the recent standoff between the city and Santaco. And so what is it that the city, or rather provincial government, can do?
So you're talking about very different matters here. The problem is that the one requires the exercise of powers that national government firmly believes local government does not have and actively disputes with us. So I'm well aware of Aaron's research, and I am in fairly frequent contact with him and also follow the research he does. There is a long-standing crisis around extortion in Cape Town. We also developed a situation on kidnapping. These matters are not unique to Cape Town at all. In fact, they are less prevalent in Cape Town than in other provinces. We just speak about them a lot more and are constantly driving the interventions around them much more loudly. So in the case of the kidnapping, that was an issue that was pushed onto a fever pitch and came to a point when there was a meeting facilitated by the Muslim Judicial Council, which we attended, and where SAPS gave a commitment to establishing a kidnapping task team. That has gradually taken off, and the city is contributing and assisting SAPS with addressing those kidnappings, and we've seen the positive impact. Equally so on the extortion side, but there are some critical elements missing on the extortion side, specifically around the crime intelligence area. And this is a domain which is uniquely and specifically that of the national government. Understand that the city's core role in terms of the constitution is traffic and bylaw enforcement. Crime prevention is a national competency. And we have long since abandoned the issue of trying to explain to or saying that we will not get involved because this is somebody else's constitutional mandate. We have stepped up, for instance, in LEAP to the point of 1.8 billion rand that the city and province jointly spend on dealing with crime in the 12, now 13 worst crime-affected areas in terms of serious violent crime. And we've seen the dividends of that. While the rest of South Africa saw the murder rate increase by around 15%, we saw our murder rate in the city decrease by 11%. So we've managed to chart a very different path, which is from that which is plaguing South Africa. And over time, we believe that gap will get bigger and bigger as we persist. We're also continuously monitoring what happens to the firearm and drug arrests we make, so that when these matters are removed from the court roll or there fails to be a conviction, because your conviction rate in gang-related murders is below 2%, which means your criminal justice system, all of which components sit in the hands of national government, not local or provincial government control any component of that criminal justice system. That those levers are those systems are at the moment significantly dysfunctional and are not serving the communities they're meant to protect. The watching briefs we do and the investigative resources we've deployed is allowing us to identify that and then engage SAPS and the NPA about trying to get those cases back, tracking them and making sure we get convictions. Otherwise, we will not be able to give relief to communities such as this, where the same shooters are committing the same crimes over and over without impact. So we are trying very much to bat well or punch well above our weight range in terms of what local government is meant to do or is considered legally able to do by national government, often with great resistance from them. But I would say increasing acceptance, and where there is that acceptance, we are working with them to change these outcomes.
All right. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. J.P. Smith, City of Cape Town Mayoral Committee Member for Safety and Security.